Thank you all for coming. We're pleased that you could make it today. We apologize for the late notice that we are moving this to a live stream. We're so glad others are able to join us online and help us practice social distancing in a safe manner for the university community. So thank you. Related to that today, I wanted to let you know that this is being live streamed and recorded. So for those of you who aren't in the room or weren't able to attend or wanted to follow up for information, this will be available to you afterward as well. If we don't get through all the questions and answers from the live stream at the end of this talk, we will send the remaining questions to Glenn, and he's graciously said that he will respond to those, and we will send out an email with those answers to everyone who registered for the event. The one-on-one portion of this, a few logistics before I get into intro here. The one-on-one portions of this event today will happen just in this room in the back at that round table. And so because of that, if you're waiting or visiting, you're welcome to stay, but there are refreshments in the hallway, so we just ask that you keep the volume to a minimum when you're in the room. And those meetings will start at 11:05. Okay? Great, thank you. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Glenn Dillon, who is the Director of Operations for the American Heart Association. And it's a fantastic partner who last year, for fiscal year 19, he operated a portfolio of research of around $190 million. So they're great partners in research. And Glenn formerly was a professor of pharmacology and neurosciences. He was also the vice president of the Health Institutes and the vice president for research for the University of North Texas Health Science Center. He had similar roles at WVU, and he also completed a postdoc research at Upjohn. His PhD is in physiology and biophysics from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Glenn Dillon, and thank you for coming. I can't do any fist bumps or anything here today. So.
Yeah, so American Health, we're pretty, so it is great to be here. We fund a lot of meetings and have a lot of meetings as a large research organization, and we're kind of a public health organization too. So, we do a lot around messaging and trying to make sure we convey good information. So we had been advocating the elbow bump for the past week or so, and then just yesterday they sent around, well, we need to, because of the social distancing, have some different ideas. So they said, do something like this, a hand over the heart, which is great, jazz hands, which is what I love, or just kind of the wave, and or peace. So anyway, those are our sanctioned, AHA-sanctioned greetings at this point. It's great to be here. So I had an opportunity to be at Pitt a couple times when I was at WVU. In fact, I put a grant in with Steve Reese, the head of the CTSI here. Steve had invited us to participate in a grant around helping develop commercialization and technologies, helping faculty. We ended up not getting the grant, so we didn't get to work too much together further. But it's nice to be back in this part of the woods. I drove through the tunnel and saw Pittsburgh, and it was always so nice to come out to Pittsburgh. It's such a pretty town and a good town. So, brief overview. If I talk kind of uninterrupted, my talk's probably, 35, 40 minutes. You guys feel free. I'm a pretty informal speaker, so again, feel free to interrupt me as we're going, and those of you online too, if that's doable. But then we should have plenty of time for Q&A after, and then I know I'll be getting to visit with a few of you individually after. So here's kind of the outline. So we are a pretty large funder, so we'll talk about some of those opportunities. How we approach that, kind of our philosophy for research, what we're trying to do with the portfolio. I'll give you some ideas on timelines and expectations. People are always curious about our peer review process. How do we do it? So I'll just share a little bit about that. You guys will be not surprised to hear how we do things there. I'll share a bit about program success rates. Again, our portfolio is really funded pretty exclusively on donations every year, so sometimes it's up and down. Last year was a very good year. We funded about almost $190 million. And our success rates were correspondingly quite good, but it's never a guarantee when we don't always know what our numbers will be. Then I'll highlight a few other things, including some what I think are great career development opportunities. The reason I'm at Heart is because I was a volunteer for Heart for many years. I mean, my first award was as a pre-doc when I was in grad school. My first faculty grant was from American Heart Association. We're pretty good about pulling people in. And so I started doing a lot of service, peer review work, et cetera, and always had hard on my list if I ever wanted to make a change from academia. So there's some opportunities I think that are great if you might want to think about. We are the largest non-for-profit funder of cardiovascular disease and stroke research. And again, that umbrella, that's even kind of now an old descriptor for us. I'll tell you more about that, and that's why some of you may be here. But that's been true beyond the federal government. And we have funded over $4.5 billion. I think it's about $4.7 billion now since we started funding grants about 70 years ago. We do 850 awards each year. And any one time, we've got about 2,000 active grants in the portfolio. So we're holding a pretty good chunk of change within the portfolio. So you guys have actually been, and I had a great discussion with Paul and Alex this morning, learned some about Pitt and got up to, and I've known Pitt's been a great institution in part just because I've been in academia a long time and known the Health Science Center well, but also from being local. And so I got to hear a lot about your great successes and really impressed and happy to see. You've also been really active with American Heart. So I was telling these fellows this morning, I pulled the data, and we've looked at application volume by institution over the past few years, and Pitt is up there in the top at least 10, maybe even higher than that. I think maybe even in the top 5. And you've had since 2016, and then most of those I think were mid-2016. So just about the last 3.5 or so years, about 62 grants totaling about $10 million. And that's not a big part of your overall operation, but it's probably, it's not probably a bad chunk for the private foundations you get money from. So we thank you for that. We fund the great science, so we know you guys are doing good science, and we're happy that you continue to submit to us. And again, you've got funding from pretty much every mechanism I'll show you today. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to point out a couple things. So our research program is really driven by these 12 essential elements. It's kind of our guiding principles for what we want the research enterprise to do, how we want it to unfold and help investigators, and how we hold ourselves accountable, et cetera. I've bolded a couple. We put this together, it's been about 10 years ago. This is really at the board level. They really just kind of charted this course, and it touches on, again, across the life, across the careers of investigators, funding not just good science, but also investigators, trying to really innovate and move things forward and return on investment and translating technologies. But there's one in particular, and this is why we decided to kind of do this research roadshow, is we are broadening our portfolio, and I forgot to add the mission statement, but our mission is now really, can't remember the lead in, but it's basically to foster a world of longer and healthier lives. So no longer does it specifically mention cardiovascular disease and stroke. And we're not moving away from that, but we are taking a broader look. Our board feels we can have impact and support science in other areas, and so we're doing that. And the essential element that's most relevant to what we fund is element 3, and you can see the prior wording here. Support research in all areas of cardiovascular and stroke science that drive to HA's 2020 goals and the overall mission. That's great. That's what we've been operating on. We just changed this, just in the past few months. The board adopted this in this October meeting. The corresponding element has been changed now to support all areas of cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, and brain health research. So we're really thinking beyond just stroke-related issues with the brain. Plus, we've added this focus on overall health and well-being across the lifespan. So, that kind of does broaden up the opportunities for applicants as they think about us as a potential funding mechanism. Kind of some nuts and bolts. Wherever you are, whatever type of, whatever institution, whatever program, department, school you're in, we just want good ideas that we think can have some important impact. We've historically, Heart has been a pretty basic science-focused organization, and that's still most of our portfolio, but whereas in the past it was 80 to 85%, it's now about 2/3, so about 2/3 is still basic science, and about 1/3 is now clinical and translational. And we're moving into now these broader areas, so we will continue to monitor that and see. But again, it's really about where are those good ideas coming from. And obviously, we put a lot of emphasis on supporting everybody in the research enterprise. So we track our figures on how are we doing as supporting those who are not as well represented in science, and we look at that every year, and we have some goals about how we can expand that, and certainly with regard to gender as well. We have gotten away from a minimum required % effort. Still has to be practical for your study section. If you write a grant saying I'm going to give 1%, they'll probably say, not much is going to happen with 1%. But we're sensitive to the time demands on everybody, and so we've taken away any type of minimum % effort. Used to be, and you guys are part of, and actually we just reorganized the affiliates. You used to be part of the Great Rivers affiliate. I don't know if you even know that. HEART is a national organization, so I work at the National Center, which is in Dallas. But over the course of its time, like many other related organizations, we have regional offices and affiliates as well. And Pittsburgh, as well as West Virginia, when I was there, was part of the Great Rivers affiliate. We just reorganized, and so we had 7 affiliates, and we now have 5. And I think you guys might have moved to the Midwest affiliate in the not moved, but in the reorganization. I think that might be right. And I'm saying all this because the affiliates used to fund grants as well. So my first grant was, again, my pre-doc was from the Illinois affiliate. When I got my first grant as a faculty member, it was from the Texas affiliate. They went away from state affiliates quite some time ago to regions. But all those states and then all those regions funded grants as well. So they had their own grant-making mechanism. And that was good, but it lost some opportunities for us. And one of those is the transferability. So if you got funding from the old Great Rivers affiliate, you couldn't take that grant out of the Great Rivers affiliate. You know, if you got a great gig at UCSD. Not that you guys would want to leave Pitt, because it's a great place, but if you had an opportunity elsewhere, your American Heart grant could not go with you. Now that everything's administered through the National Center, all the funding is from the National Center. You know, wherever you want to go, you can take your grant with you. So that's one advantage. And it helped us gain some administrative efficiencies so we could fund more science. I'll talk to you about the strategically focused research networks. In general, you can hold one American Heart grant at a time, other than if you're a project lead on one of the networks, then you can hold an individual award also. And we can talk a little bit more about that if you have questions. So I did just kind of put up most of our programs, and I'll just kind of walk you through them. And again, stop me if you have questions, or we can save those for later. We've always been very devoted to helping careers get started. So even still now, of those 800 plus awards we funded last year, about 600 were to what we consider early career. So trainees, pre and postdocs, and up through assistant professors and research assistant professors that rank. So about 3/4 of the grants have supported early career, and we're still quite committed to that. The dollars come out a little bit less because those grants on average are lower, so the percentage of the funding is usually about 60 to 65%. We're revamping this mechanism. We have an institutional undergraduate award, so that's actually to the institution. And then that institution identifies some students for training and a summer research experience typically. You know, it's a pretty small grant, and $20K a year over 3 years. And so the reality is we just haven't been getting a lot of applications for this. And the reality is it's because the money's probably, one of the reasons is the money's not enough. I mean, it's not that many students to really have a critical mass. We didn't have additional funds in there. The stipends weren't that great. So our funding subcommittee has made a recommendation to significantly increase this number. This will go to about 160. So we're going to increase the amount of students you can have. We're going to increase the stipend of those students, and then we will provide some support to whoever is really administering the program, because basically it was your time devoted to that without any offset. Now, we don't have that listed on the website yet because the new dollars, because it still has to be finally approved in the spring, and then I'm expecting that will occur, and then the size of those awards will increase. So the next time you'd apply, instead of a $60,000 grant, it'll be, I think we bumped it up to about $150,000, $160,000. So we're hoping that expands that. Again, a real wheelhouse for us are our fellowship programs, both pre and postdoc. We moved 2 or 3 years ago. We did kind of reimagine our portfolio a bit, and at that time, we just moved to NIH scale. So we are the same as NIH scale for our pre and postdoctoral programs. You can get those for 2 years. The great thing about our fellowship programs, which some of you may know, but you might not, There's no citizenship or green card requirement, so unlike federal fellowships, we support a ton of international trainees. And we really are happy to do that, and we think that's a great contribution that we make in helping those trainees and helping advance science kind of globally, but also providing some additional flexibility for all of you. So, in fact, the last time we ran these numbers, just about half of our fellowships were international. So it's a really important part of what we do. Some of you in this room, or I know you have colleagues here who probably had what was called a scientist development grant. And again, that's usually considered kind of that first faculty position grant. When we retooled the portfolio, it was actually right before I got here in 2000. I joined out in 2018. It was in 2017 the portfolio was re-envisioned. It was converted to what's called the Career Development Award. The intent's still the same. It's really for that first faculty position or that first permanent position. It doesn't necessarily have to be a faculty position. You can be a staff scientist, but it cannot be a trainee position. So you can apply for the grant as a fellow, but you have to have a permanent position activated at the time of the award activation. So we do have a lot of people who apply last year of the fellowship, they get their appointment, and the award activates. We put, in retooling that, we put a little more emphasis on mentoring. So awardees need to have a mentoring team to really, again, just help them get off to the best start possible, make sure their track to success is good. This is really important as well. We worked closely with the NIH. It used to be that you could not concurrently hold one of our career development awards and an NIHK award. And we're like, well, nobody's getting rich off these things. You know, we want to help the new faculty as much as we can. So we approached NIH about, what about mutually holding these? You know, for really basically the same project. We worked, the two biggest institutes for NIH that overlap with us are Heart, Lung, and Blood and NINDS, Neurological Institute of, National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And so we worked with both of them. They were both good with that too. So as of now, if you have a K award, and then you can apply for our CDA as long as there's no budget overlap. So, you know, I usually tell people the K provides a lot of salary support. Use our grant for the hire your postdoc, pay for your student, for the project support, and maybe a little salary support if needed as well. And again, NIH is good with that. So we implemented that this past fall. So that's now in place. And you'd work with us on that and with your NIH Sponsored Programs Office on a couple details, because the institutes have a little bit different look about how they want to do it, but it's very doable as long as there's no budget overlap. Scientific overlap is okay, because again, we're leveraging their dollars, they're leveraging our dollars. It just gives that newer faculty member that much better opportunity to really get going. A staple of our portfolio for a long time, and kind of a real stamp of approval as an investigator if you're in this space, is what's called the Established Investigator Award. And that kind of targets the mid-career, the associate professor, someone who's really demonstrated done some nice science, is on a good trajectory. I always struggle with that word trajectory. I got it right that time. You know, doing very well. The science is very strong. And it's kind of a recognition, a nice year, a 5-year award for $400K over that time. Gives them a little more flexibility for a different kind of project. But it is really, if in the cardiovascular realm, pretty widely recognized if you have an Established Investigator Award on your CV. We started just about 5 years ago now, the Merit Award. This is our highest award to an individual. These are, you know, good-sized grants, $1 million grant over 5 years. Our indirect cost rate is only 10%. So when you think about $1 million grant for us, I mean, that's over $900K in direct dollars compared to like a $1 million grant from NIH, and you got to cleave off about a third of that for the indirect costs. So a lot of support goes into the lab for a grant of that size. These are really for, again, that full professor individual, or he or she has really made a mark already on their field. And so we only do 2 of these a year. It's a pretty kind of prestigious thing. But it's also to kind of venture out in a project that's a little bit different than they may have had. For all of our grants, we've taken away, we used to have a restriction, and some of you might recall this, that if you had more than really about an R01 and maybe another smaller grant, you couldn't get an American Heart Grant, because we well, if you got this much money, we don't really want to fund you. We said, we don't want to do that. We want the best science. Somebody is holding a couple R1s, they got another great idea. We'll certainly take a look at it, and if it's a good idea, we'll fund that too. So we've taken away those kinds of restrictions financially. The Innovative Project Award listed here, that's our high-risk, high-reward grant. We've actually had a version of this for now over 10 years. There's a heavy screening process on this, so it's good and bad. A lot of those get screened out. The good part is it's a one-page application. We want to see your idea. We send them to we recruit a big crew of reviewers, and then they'll prioritize those one-pagers. And those that then we invite full proposals from a couple hundred, I think, normally. And then they compete for funding. So there is a pretty heavy weaning process, but again, it's not that much effort to just put together a one-pager. Here's the idea. We won't accept, don't want preliminary data. In fact, if the full application comes in, and if you got a bunch of preliminary data in there, we'll kick it out because we really want things, the data aren't yet established, really kind of focusing on, this is an idea that might be out there, but again, the payoff could be really good. Most of them probably won't pan out, but hopefully there will be some that do. So not a huge grant, a couple years, a couple $100K, enough to get you the data you need to then, is that idea going to work or not, and then hopefully advance the project through subsequent funding. The Transformational Project Award is really kind of a reimagining of what we had for many, many years, the grant and aid. This is kind of like the traditional small NIH grant, like a small R01. Pretty good base, strong hypothesis, good set of preliminary data already to back up what you're proposing. Kind of that classical, we've got this, now we think, based on what we've learned from this, we want to do these next set of experiments. So decent award, $300K over 3 years. But again, think of that like a grant and aid, like a smaller NIH type grant. And here's where I mentioned the other accessible funds issue in writing. We've taken that away. We started this project about 5 years ago, the Collaborative Science Award. I actually was part of the peer review group for the first go-round for this. And we really do want to, and this is not an uncommon thing, but we committed to this. I think the first round was 2014. We really want people coming together with different ideas, with different expertise, different contributions they can make to the project. So a material scientist and a biochemist, or an engineer and a thoracic surgeon, bringing together those disciplines. Not a real out there idea, but we've had some pretty cool projects, pretty nice size grants, $750K over 3 years, depending on how you parse that up, more or less an R01 per year. Again, need at least 2 investigators. This is kind of basically the multi-PI type mechanism that NIH uses. You can have more than that, whatever the team is to make the best grant, however many people you need to really make an interesting project. That's what we want to see. We did add a new expectation, I think, last year. We don't want, again, kind of with our philosophy of always trying to help foster and build and mentor as well. We don't want 3 full professors coming in, close to Nobel Prize winners. We want them coming in, but we also want them to bring along maybe an assistant or associate professor as well to be part of that project. So we have put in an expectation. One of the team members needs to be either assistant or associate professor. So that might make you think a little bit more about what your team looks like, but we think that's important, and so we'd like to do that. I'm going to skip over the area grant because it's not operable for Pitt. It's basically like the NIH area grants for institutions that don't have a lot of NIH funding. You guys are not one of those. I saw the numbers again today, so congratulations on all of that. Any questions on that traditional set of programs before I move to more of our strategic programs and then kind of continue down the path? Okay, yes?
So for the Career Development Award, you can have it concurrently with the K, but can you have it concurrently with a bigger grant, like R? Or
No.
Is it that,
No.
So in that case, established investigator is really
Yes. Or the transformational, or the
collaborative?
any of those others, collaborative, innovative. We have no restrictions on rank other than we really do expect for the merit, that's full professors. We really are targeting associate professors for the established investigator. Everything else we do, well, I shouldn't say that. And then the Career Development Award, that's for early rank. But then the innovative, the transformational, collaborative science, all ranks are fine. The networks, all ranks are fine for the projects within the networks. Their institute grants, all ranks are fine. I'll talk about those as well.
Do you expect, sorry,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
do you expect preliminary data for the collaborative?
Yeah, usually.
Lynn, can you please restate the question or answer?
Oh, sure. The first question was on the CDA, could you have a CDA and a K first? We said yes, but you cannot have a CDA and an R series grant. So that then we kind of say, okay, we'll probably pull our funds and help support somebody else that hasn't yet hit the R. Okay, now the last question was, and the answer was, Collaborative Science Award. The question was, do you need to have preliminary data? Yeah, I'm trying to think back on, I don't know that we've funded anything without preliminary data through the Collaborative Science Award. Okay.
What's your definition of early career for the Career Development Award?
Up through assistant professor. We used to have a restriction that if you were 4 years already appointed, but because the timelines have kind of pushed out, we pull that away, but you do have to be still assistant professor rank.
Is it acceptable for the collaborative sciences that the two investigators, even though they're in different fields, have previously worked together? Is that favorable or unfavorable?
It's a great question. We struggled a lot with this. I, in fact, chaired that very first review, and we had quite a bit of that. And so we don't, the question, great, thanks, Cynthia. Apologize for you following along at home. The question was, what about a history of, even though you're in different areas, is there a penalty or an advantage to having collaborated already? We want the answer is, it's fine to have collaborated, and it's probably in some ways good. We want to make clear, we want to be sure the new project is not just continuing what you've done. So it really needs to be a new area that you would be working on. The obvious, the positives are, okay, we know you guys can collaborate, so we expect that that'll continue. So that's the plus side. The other side is we don't want it to be too comfortable and you do what you've always done. So that's, we jockey with that a lot over the years, but that's kind of where we've fallen. Okay. Okay, so again, most of our portfolio is still what we would put in this bucket of investigator-initiated. We take your idea, no matter what it is, we send it to study section. I'll tell you more about that. Starting again around 2014 or so, and after some strategic planning, our leadership said, look, we really want to have a part of the portfolio that's strategically focused as well. So what are the high priority things that we see out there that we think American Heart should start to pay attention to? And so are there specific areas that we want to fund? And the collaborative science was that, although we didn't get specific about types of projects with some of the programs we have, and I'll talk a bit about them. Related to that, around the same time, we started to get into precision medicine. And the creation of the Institute for Precision Cardiovascular Medicine in Untitled has been now about 4 years, I'd say. American Heart sees an opportunity for us to really kind of take a lead in this space in cardiovascular biology of precision medicine and applying some of these questions more precisely, where all the real success primarily in precision medicine so far has been along the lines of cancer. Oncology has been pretty successful because of some of the close associations of various mutations and whatnot, and sensitivities of different therapies. Other medicines are coming along, but we've decided we want to have a pretty heavy emphasis on that on the cardiovascular side, so we created the Institute. So it does several things. It's a platform for science, so we have what's called a precision medicine platform. There are a lot of very powerful analytical tools. It's also a data warehousing place, so you can store your data there as well. But we do fund awards through the Institute. So the focus over the past few years has been on, we've had a pretty good emphasis on artificial intelligence and machine learning through the Institute. It's not a huge part of that 190 or 180 million every year. The Institute's not a huge part yet, but on the order of maybe average of $10 million a year we're funding from the Institute, and it's still a growing operation. So the success rates are not too bad. Vary a little bit. So I'll show you some titles in a minute. Through the Institute, though, we have also decided we will and are funding some fellowships as well as training grants. We've done a few data challenge grants, which is, again, here's broadly a problem, And these have been like $1 million grants. We funded a few of these. And so those opportunities are developing. Research goes red. So I'll talk about the strategically focused research networks. And some of you may know, for the network we had focused on women's health, Pitt and UPMC, McGee Women's was one of the awardees for one of those centers. The Institute is hosting, we're building a big repository for women. We're trying to recruit a million women to be willing to be participants in all kinds of research projects related to cardiovascular health, but we're growing even beyond that. And we've really had good success and interest in building that. In fact, we just had a funding mechanism released as far as looking at tools and methods to even improve that and further develop that database. So more to come on that over the years, but that's going to be a great resource for everybody interested in women's health issues. Here's some examples of the grants we funded. Again, deep learning-based platform for quantification of scar and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, cloud computing, machine learning, computational fuel dynamics for coronary artery disease, machine and deep learning for heart failure trajectory. You can see again here a pretty strong emphasis on artificial intelligence and machine learning, but we'll take other areas as well. Some of these have been specific calls in this area. But I think here there's a pretty good opportunity with some of the computational capacity you have, the analytical capacity you have, plugging into UPMC with all the biomedical and the clinical records and such, and the other things that you all do. And I believe you have had some institute funding when I pulled your numbers, but I can't specifically say what that might be. But again, keep your eyes open for that. Heart has taken a real interest as well, and I'm not going to go through all these, but we have adopted the philosophy over the past few years of looking for partners who have kind of a similar mission that we do, so we can, again, kind of mutually, kind of like we're doing with the CDA awards, mutually support research in an area. So these are just some examples, but a big one I'll mention, one is upcoming. We have a deadline. We've partnered with the Enduring Hearts Foundation. We're doing a $3 million call for applications focus on pediatric heart transplantation, so anything related to issues around transplantation of pediatric heart. That'll be an opportunity. The deadline of that will be in July, so that might be something that some here could take advantage of. I know you've got a developing, a strong, very strong interest and expertise in brain health, neuroscience. We use the term brain health. And again, you saw that featured on one of the earlier slides. I guess it was, we announced the awards a little over a year ago, but we partnered with the Paul G. Allen Foundation, Paul G. Allen from Microsoft. He has a foundation called the Frontiers Group. They fund a lot of different things. They have an interest in neuroscience. He specifically had an interest in cognitive issues and cognitive decline. So we put in $20 million. Paul Allen put in $20 million. We had there's a private donor who added another $3 million. So we had a $43 million bucket to fund three. We ended up funding three pretty large projects, one at La Jolla, one up at Stanford, and one at Cleveland. And again, away from our traditional cardiovascular or stroke related. So this was cognitive decline, whatever aspect of the project you wanted to put together. So that was a first step for us in broadening that brain health view beyond just stroke-related issues. I touched on these a couple times already. This is just the map of what we funded. We do 2 of these strategically focused networks every year. They're $15 million grants. And again, just about, we typically have 4 centers within that network, so every center will get $3.75 million. We have a new one in the works right now. It has a little bit different model. But is on focus on health technology and innovation, and we've just been going through the review process for that. But you can see the topics that we funded. Again, typically 2 of these per year. And there's Pitt at the Go Red Center. One of the centers for the Go Red initiative was focused or was funded here at Pitt. So you guys have, I think, opportunity to continue to make some strides there. We had some institutions that have really figured this out, and boy, they've repeatedly come back, and they have done very well. And we don't not like that because the project's been very good, but we want to make sure this mechanism everybody can take advantage of. And so we really are focused on broadening it as much as we can. But you guys, I think, are well positioned to take a look at these, because we tend to want, again, a broad set of scientific opportunity, or scientific disciplines bringing to a particular problem. We often look for something in basic science, clinical, and population health, but we're not necessarily always restricted to that. But the next one that's upcoming, and again, this might be an opportunity for Pitt, as we broaden the mission, I do try to say sometimes, well, we're not going to all of a sudden start funding a lot of cancer grants. But at the same time, we're going to fund some cancer grants because of this cardio-oncology mechanism that we've come up with. We're working on the RFA for this. It'll be out in May. The deadline is, I think, in October. But it really will be the intersection of a lot of the, oncologic therapies do have some cardiovascular consequences, and the idea is how can we learn from those? What's going on? What can we do to minimize those? Because we don't see this problem going away, so we want to see what we can do to address it. So we still are not going to be a cancer grant organization, but again, this is the intersection of cancer and cardiovascular biology. And again, this is on the website. Maybe you guys are gathering it through the stream, but I'll certainly make the PowerPoint available to Paul, in the next couple of days. This just shows our timeline that's now set. We rolled this out just a couple of weeks ago. Our fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30. So we tend to kick off our new programs after July every year. So this just shows you much of what I've talked about. I do want to point out one thing. We've really, we all hate, okay, I submit my grant, it's a year later I finally find out if I'm going to get funded. Nobody likes that. So we've really been challenged in the research, on the research team to do what we can to fix that. So our leadership said, we want you to cut the timeline from application to grant start date by 25% over 2 years. And we will have done that at this application cycle starting in the fall. So you see here our fellowships. We're getting them in early, mid-September. Activation as early as January 1. So we've got a fairly tight timeline for those, and some of our other grants as well. The network grants tend to take a little bit longer because they're big, they're complicated, they're multi-levels of review. But for most of our programs, we've been able to tighten that down. We've also, and I get mixed reviews on this, and I had the same feeling when I was writing grants. We've also shortened the length of the applications. So the average application length is also shortened. We did analysis as well of all the other ancillary forms and stuff we collect, and those that just weren't getting used much. We surveyed our peer reviewers, say, what do you pay attention to? Those that they said, well, really need this, obviously we kept, and obviously the big stuff. But a lot of things we're like, okay, we don't really need to collect this form because nobody's using it. So we're trying to make the application process a little easier for everybody. We're trying to get dollars into the hands easier. We're also trying to be flexible on the start dates. We do get a fair amount of clinical fellows, and often, as you all know, their appointments are pretty well tied to that July 1 timeline. So we've said, okay, if you need to delay, you can start your grant as early as January 1, but if you need to delay it till July 1, that's okay. We'll do that for you. So we really want to work with everybody and make it as painless as possible to take the funding. That's a weird way to say it because everybody wants the funding, so it's not usually painful. But nonetheless, that's an area that we tried to work on. We put this requirement in play 2 years ago, and we looked at the industry and we found that most of them do this. We used to have an application fee, so when you submitted your grant, you had to pay $85 or $100 or whatever. Like, well, okay, let's scrap the application fee, but now we're going to make you guys be members to apply. So you do have to apply for membership to American Heart. The entry-level membership, the cheapest one is, I think it's $85, $83, so it's not terrible. It's actually less than the application fee was. But we do ask you to do that. It's not a long and onerous process, but it's not instant either, so don't wait to the last minute. Don't wait to submit your grant and say, oh, I got to do my membership. Give us a week or so to get you through the application queue, and so you can apply for that. Okay, I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about peer review. And again, I'll go quickly on these last few slides because I don't think I'll surprise you with any of this. It's very standard. We use basically NIH review process. We have a different scoring system. However, we're moving to a new grants management system starting next fall. So every application moving forward will be away from our old Grants at Heart home-built system, which we've used for 10 years, and it's been a good system, longer than that now, 12 or 13 years. We'll be in Proposal Central. And with that move, we're going to go to the 1 to 9 scoring system that NIH uses. We've been on a 1 to 5. But basically, other than that, it's the same. Every grant, you decide the science classification when you submit. That's one of those forms we ask you to fill out. Where does your science kind of fit in? We set up about 100 study sections every year to field the grants. We get several thousand applications every year to fund those 800 or so. So we'll farm those to the right study sections, and we work with the chair and the co-chair on assigning 2 particular reviewers. So every grant gets 3 reviewers. Again, 2, an R1, R2, and then a reader. Again, NIH style review. We used to do mostly face-to-face. Now we do mostly teleconference because of cost and convenience, and it does allow us to fund quite a few more grants and bringing everybody in and paying for hotels and airline tickets. Although many of our specialty programs or the strategic programs, because of their unique nature, are still teleconference. We do what's called streamlining, which is the same as triage at NIH. So, if your grant comes in and the reviewer's like, it's not likely to be funded, it doesn't really look competitive, here's the problems with it. So it gets set aside. You get your critiques, just like with NIH, but it doesn't have the benefit of actually getting discussed and potentially scored. We do that with about 40 to 50%, depending on the program. But again, the criteria, pretty much what you've seen before: innovation, impact, significance, approach, investigator, and environment. For the fellowships, I will point this out because it is a big part of what we do. For the fellowships, we really equally weight the science. Now, the application itself is an interesting, good project. The applicant, as that person has some success or demonstrated potential to be a successful investigator. And then does he or she have a strong mentor and a training plan and environment around them to help them succeed? So those are all equally weighted. So it's not that the project's not important, but it's not as important as some of our other programs where we really want to know the idea, and obviously we need to make sure an investigator can pull that off. The CDA has a somewhat similar thing where we look at all 3 of those factors. We're very committed to helping investigators explain their science, so we put a little more emphasis on lay summaries. I know I was the same way. We tend to write the lay summary after we've written the grant, like, okay, I got to plug in a lay summary, and we'll do that at the last. We don't want people thinking about it that way. We want them to think a little bit more about how they communicate to the lay audience. Because you guys would probably agree, as scientists, we haven't always been our best friends at how we communicate our science. And so we really want to help people do that. So as of this year, the lay summary is now a scoreable element of the grant. It's not a big part, but we ask the reviewers when they're giving the final score, consider about 5 to 10% of that should come from how you see the lay summary. So it can push you one way or the other, depending on how much attention you pay to that. Again, everything's on the website, so refer back to that. Success rates, pretty good over the past few years. We got some that are really tight. Merit's always very competitive. I'll point out our career development, over a third of our grants, right at a third the past couple of years. Our fellowships, even higher than that. We had actually over 40% for one of our fellowship programs. This year, it turns out we had a tie we had several grants right at a tie, and we pushed them all into the funding side. Institute is variable depending on the programs, but it could be quite good. On average, it's been about a third of the Institute grants, a quarter to a third have been getting funded. Okay, that's simple and easy, but there is kind of a nice YouTube link here showing someone who's actually an engineer at one of the University of Illinois campuses, I think, talking about her science and how she does that with a lay audience. I'll skip over this, but if you're a member of HEART, there are, I guess I'm not skipping over it, we have a council structure because cardiovascular science is big and stroke science, and there are a lot of different, I think there are about 16 different councils, kind of interest areas in that space, hypertension, stroke, et cetera. And some of those councils provide some levels of funding too. So if you're a council member, that's always good. And I'll only say a couple things on this so we have remaining time for any questions. We started as a pilot just last year, or this current year we're just now in the midst of. We want to give our, again, the younger folks every opportunity to kind of get inside the black box of peer review as well, because that's always been something that you need to learn about. So for those of you, those fellows who have an AHA-funded postdoc, if they're in their second year, if the mentor is on board, we'll assign them to a study section, and they'll actually be pretty much full reviewers in a study section. They'll get assigned grants. They'll have to write critiques. They'll have to upload their critiques into the system. They'll be part of the discussion group. The only thing that's different is their final score. They won't submit a final score. They'll be involved on the front side and get that full experience of being a participant in a study section. And we did this for everybody. Everybody loved it, so we're going to try to expand that as much as we can. But we do think it's, I think back to the first time I peer reviewed or wrote grants and not really knew what was going on and what's really important and what's less important. So if you are or have fellows funded by AHA, this is an opportunity available to them. And again, we'll expand that. As of now, our capacity, we just kind of wanted to get it going and see how we could do it. But we can ramp it up a bit. All right, here's my one sales pitch. And I had a chance to and I kind of took the opportunity to do this. I talked at the beginning. I'm at Hart now because I had great support from Hart, and throughout my academic career, it was really where I put a lot of my scientific service toward, working for both the American Heart as a peer reviewer and serving on various committees. And it really did help my career. So I always think it's a great opportunity, especially early in your career, to get involved as a reviewer for Hart. It helps you meet a lot of people. You get to see a lot of cool science. And those of you who are more established as well, we really always are looking for great expertise, leadership opportunities through Hart. You can start to influence. And I'm really kind of making this appeal now because as we do broaden into some of these other areas, what's going to help really move the ball is the right reviewers. So we will need reviewers, and as we broaden into artificial intelligence, as we broaden into more computational areas, as we broaden into more the social science type of realm, the prevention and wellness, all these things that we're now fully embracing, and certainly on the neuroscience side, beyond just stroke. So it takes a lot of time. You all know that because you've done it. But it really is rewarding, and there's some great opportunities that come from that. So if you're considering it, reach out to me or just pop online, and you can go to one of these sites if you want to be a peer reviewer. We obviously aspire for exceptional quality in peer review. At the same time, we do have a pretty good portion of our reviewers who are early in the career ranks, because again, that's a way for them to help get that experience, and then maybe get some of those opportunities to review at NIH, NSF, and other agencies. So, okay, I think that's about it. A few other just blurbs, webpage, again, everything's there. We're tweeting now. We're not tweeting a lot, but we have a tweeter. So if you want to follow us at AHA Research, we do tweet out announcements about programs and other things. We have a newsletter that's pretty good called the Research Insider. We send that out monthly. I know everybody gets bombarded with newsletters, but if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what's going on at Hart, that's a pretty good one that you can tap into. That's just the website, and that's me. So Glenn with 2Ns.Dillon@hart.org. So I'm happy to, again, field the questions. And I know if there are any coming in from the folks off-site, I'm happy to field those too. We'll start with the room. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know the money isn't always the largest, but on average, for example, in a transformational project award, how often would you say you see a subcontract or collaborating labs? How do study sections tend to do that?
That's fine. That's fine. In fact, I didn't talk about it. We don't fund awards with the exception of the Institute, and we've had a couple of mechanisms where we partner. Everything we fund is in the United States, but when we did that Paul Allen Award, we did a smaller award with him too. We did take international applications, but it turns out none of them got funded. We have funded one or two international sites through the institution, and it's a long-winded way to say you can even subcontract internationally for some of our programs. So subcontract is okay, but certainly if it's in the, and including even, we'll allow subcontract to a private for-profit organization too if they've got an expertise. We won't fund them directly. We fund not-for-profits, but you can subcontract whatever makes the project go.
Just a reminder to please either use the microphone there or...
Oh, let me repeat the question. I'm never very good at remembering that. So, The question, if you didn't pick up by the answer, was how do we view, say, for the transformational project, subcontracts with other institutions or agencies, and it's fine. Yeah. Ah, there we go. Somebody going to use that.
Hi, so for the predoctoral and postdoctoral fellowships, how much do you emphasize preliminary data or feasibility data? Do you expect it to be pretty far along or to be?
Yeah, not nearly as important with some of our other mechanisms, because again, it's really about that whole training opportunity. We want there to be a reasonable proposal. A little preliminary data would be generally good because the competition for those, we get quite a few applications. But we don't expect everything to be teed up and laid out. It's really about that entire package. Is that applicant, does he or she really demonstrate potential, and are they in the right environment? And again, as long as the project's pretty solid, those other things are really important too. Yeah, that's good. That way I don't have to repeat or remember to repeat.
If someone has received an AHA grant early in their career, does that increase, decrease, have any effect at all on them receiving an award later in their career for a different project or continuing that science?
It's a great question, and we don't really have a policy. Certainly, I think philosophically we would say we like to see someone who's kind of been able to work with and take advantage of the opportunities. So it's not at all unusual for someone to be funded at least one of the fellowship stages, then get an early career development or one of the early career awards, whatever that might have been, and then continue to hit up the chain. So we don't. It's not a funding consideration by any means, but we kind of gives us a bit of a warm and fuzzy, if you will, I guess, to see that we've helped impact people's careers all the way up to the top. If you guys don't mind, that way I won't butcher your question. Yeah.
So I just had a comment and a suggestion. I'm really happy to note that you're expanding, enhancing that undergraduate research program. That's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
The suggestion is in the application, perhaps you can include an explicit instruction that tell us about your past trainees, like NIHT 30 does, because there is no space, no table, and then the reason I say is our last review said you didn't give us detailed information about.
Okay.
And so, but there is no place, in to put it.
That's
so
a
suggestion, but it's a great program.
Thank you for that. It reminds me, and I told you guys about that. So we have had a task force looking at the pipeline. And so again, we fund these individual fellowships. We're probably going to roll out what we're kind of informally calling the H32, basically a T32 type mechanism. So it would be a training grant mechanism. And in that, we looked a lot, and we worked, again, for all of our programs, we work with volunteers, folks like you who are scientists out there serving on committees. We definitely said some of these tables are key, and so we certainly said we have to retain. We did look at what NIH does with the T32, and do we need all of that data? There are a few things that I think we decided we could live without, but the training history is important. So for that program, we'll definitely have it. So I'm a little surprised to learn. I think so. I'll definitely go back and we'll look at we have all kinds of subcommittees. The research committee is our overall volunteer committee that drives most of what we do, working with the board. But then we have a number of subcommittees that manage the details of every particular program. We have a peer review subcommittee that weighs in on everything we do, peer review, portfolio management. So I'll take it back to portfolio management. My guess is we try to make it as easy as possible. And maybe there was a sense we felt, I'm thinking about this, maybe there was a sense that the extensive history at that level isn't necessarily as important, but it is important. So I'm undercutting my own explanation, but I'll take that back to the group. I appreciate the comment. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I have a question about, I am a visiting scholar from China. Now this is third year for me for the training program. My training program will be expired on this November. But now I'm still very interested in the HA, the postdoc training program. So if I can prolong the program to next 2 years, may I apply this kind of the grant?
So are you funded You're not funded through HA now?
Yeah.
You are funded through HA.
I'm not found.
You're not funded.
Yeah.
You should be, as long as your mentor is still, you still got, for our fellowship programs, like NIH, I mean, it's a kind of a joint submission of you along with your mentor and team. So as long as you still have that dedicated position or a position with a mentor, then that you should still be eligible. As long as you're eligible by the criteria for NIH, so far, I think we'll take out to 7 to 9 years from doctoral training. So again, different application requirements based on international or not, but the other requirements, we pretty much do it the way NIH does. So as long as you're not too far out from your training, you would be eligible to get a couple of years of funding from us.
Okay. Well, we submit some proof indicate that I am a faculty or some or research fellow here for over next 2 years.
Yeah, if your institution, so we would never impose on the institution requirements that they would have to follow. So you'll have to work with them on that. And if you can shoot me an email, we can think about more of the specifics. But I would say your institution would need to bless your position as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
yeah,
you.
we'll never try to step in and change that. Yeah.
My question is about your collaboration with Allen Institute about the brain health. I remember when this came out about a couple of years ago, I think 2018, the awards that were given were large chunks of money to very well-established labs. Have you changed the mechanism since where you would have like more dynamic, kind of more flexible projects of smaller scale?
Right. It's a great question, and we field questions like that routinely. That was a one-timer, as far as we know, right? So it was now it may renew, but at that point, the idea was both organizations agreed to funding in that mechanism. We really wanted kind of big, bold, team science type projects around cognitive decline. We've recently done a somewhat similar thing with vaping, and we put out a call and moved very quickly on that. And I know we're probably pushing time here as I see Cynthia. So the answer is that program has launched. It's a fairly long program. I remember it was 8 years of funding in that case, which is rare for us. But that was again, when a partner's involved, we always kind of what works best for everybody. If we do something else with them, which we hope we will certainly consider a different approach. But in that particular case, that was the program, and that's how we decided to do it. Yeah. Is that it? All right. Thank you all. And again, feel free to answer or shoot me with an email.
So I have a few logistical comments for the audience here. First of all, again, thank you so much for Glenn coming here under uncertain travel situation here. Really appreciate it. For those of you that have already signed up for one-on-ones, we will be starting those at 11:05 very precisely. They will be ending in 10-minute increments, so please respect that time, watch that time. Please don't be offended when we move you on to the next person. You do have Glenn's contact information, so we'll remember that, and we'll help answer questions if you have any. For those on the live stream, we have some afternoon slots available due to some changes in obviously attendance. So if you're still on campus, if you email Paul P2, his email address is P as in Paul, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, 43 at pitt.edu. He will set up a schedule for you. Again, that's PMP43 at pitt.edu. And he can help you out for this afternoon one-on-ones if you're still interested. Other than that, once again, thank you for Glenn. And please go ahead and enjoy some refreshments if you're waiting for your one-on-one. And then those are kind of self-facilitated unless there's a problem, and Paul and Wendy are here to help you.
No problems, that's right.
Yeah.